I want to invite Congressman Schweikert to join us. Congressman, I think this is very exciting for me to see engagement from an elected official on the topic of longevity. I didn't say it. I didn't say it. You said it. I didn't say it.
Look, thank you for inviting me.
Here, I'm give you the microphone.
No, I'm wired. I'm wired. Okay, I actually want to do 3 or 4 things. The majority of you in this room are going to be a hell of a lot smarter than I am. I'll disclose I was originally a quant. I wanted to be an actuary. I spent part of my late undergrad doing statistics, actually really just building tables for drug trials. God gave me only one talent. I'm freaky good at math. Pretty much else I'm annoying. Ask my wife. I actually wanted to do this partially because I chair also the Joint Economic Committee, but I'm also number 4 in Ways and Means, and so I chair oversight. I have the oversight over Medicare. I have the oversight over CMS, FDA, many of these things on, and so I get to deal with crazy. Not that it has anything to do with here. I mean, in the last 6 weeks, I've opened up an investigation into organ procurement. We found American organs being sold to foreigners. I have a major investigation going into hospice care. I have a war going into Medicare Part C, which is Medicare Advantage. It's only $2 trillion over 10 years, so nothing to worry about. But the other side I find most interesting in my life, it was the only reason I ran again last year, is I chaired the Joint Economic Committee. I have 6 PhD economists. 2 of them are specialists in demographics and healthcare finance policy. We actually have been doing functionally, I'm going to call it an internal, almost war game of what happens if the blue zone movement was remarkably successful. Okay, wonderful. What has to change in society? Have you thought about my pension obligations, my long-term care obligations, my changes in real estate trends? So it turns out it's more than just, hey, we got a great peptide that can help folks get healthier and lose some weight. There's actually societal and economic ramifications of this that I wish, how do I say this nicely? The brain trust I work with in Washington, which is a math-free zone. Oh no, look, if I don't sound angry, I'm not trying hard enough. 6 years, 4 months, the Social Security Trust Fund is empty. Everyone on Social Security gets a 24% cut, and we double poverty of seniors in 6.5 years. The Medicare Trust Fund is empty in 6 years and 5 months. And if you're a hospital, or particularly even a rural hospital, you're taking a 12% cut in CMS compensations. We have a math problem in our society. In a weird way, you all may be part of my solution. We don't have enough children. Next year, we will have fewer 18-year-olds than we had 20 years ago, and double the number of 65s. So if I came to you and said, in our math, and this will make sense, what is the single biggest cost contributor? I know I'm driving your cameras nuts. Your single biggest cost contributor in Medicare, just Medicare. We calculate that about 31% of Medicare is just diabetes. Just diabetes. Okay. So why, when we did the economic model, and I started 7 years ago, actually 12 years ago on our first paper we ever wrote on glutides and its potential societal impact of if overall healthcare, 33% of US healthcare is related to diabetes, we calculate, and look, we're relying on an old Milken study, and no one seems to have rebuilt it. 47% of US healthcare is associated with obesity. 33% is just diabetes. What's the single most powerful thing you could do for extending longevity? You're my new best friend. Well, so you say. As according to my wife, I'm not. I'm wound a little tight, and I drink stunning amounts of coffee. But I really care about this. I'm insane. I turned 64 about 3 weeks ago. My wife's my age, and we've adopted some kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old. Now you understand why I have an interest in the movement. I really, really would like to see my children finish their postdoctorates. I also have high, look, I had a family, God, I wish I wasn't this. I had a family that wouldn't show up to your graduation until it was grad school. Everything else was unworthy. I mean, so that could explain some of the emotional damage. Okay, so let's actually walk through the 3 things I really wanted to do. If you have data, if you have things we can help build, I really want to build sort of a economic consensus on the values and opportunities. What if over the next decade, 2 decades, you added 4 years, 5 years onto life expectancy? And it was healthy life expectancy, not living in misery. Okay. What does that mean to labor force participation if I still have a population that's substantially retiring at about 63? Can I build SPIFs in Social Security, even a SPIF potentially in Medicare, if you'd be willing to work a little bit longer? We've modeled out how to save Social Security, and one of the things in there was, hey, when you turn 65, if you were willing to continue to work for a few years, how about if you only paid about half the FICA tax? How do I keep, because it's not only the health side, there is something else we've seen statistically of those who stay active in the labor force actually also have this spike in longevity and cognitive capacity. The other side, how do I actually create a revolution for seniors in the use of technology as a backup, as we see more and more of our populations wanting to do age in place. We've been actually doing, look, you're all smarter than I am. I'll give you the elementary school. There's it's an invitation-only blog, which somehow I got invited. Simple Aura Ring. Algorithm sitting underneath it saying, hey, we're seeing temperature spikes at night on certain populations when we've had them go do a multi-cancer blood test or a full MRI. It looks like it may be an indicator of cancer. The technology of breath biopsy. I've actually sat through multiple presentations of it. You blow into it. It actually has remarkable sensors. It's indicating you have a bacterial or viral. Should it be allowed to prescribe when it's statistically competent? Right now in the United States, that technology is illegal for it to prescribe. If I can wear my medical lab, either wear it or it's in my toilet or it's in my medicine cabinet, does that change the ability for my populations to be healthier from younger remember, did I mention I have a 3-year-old? Have you tried getting a pediatric appointment? Seriously, by the time you get there, the little guy's healthy and annoyed you took him out of preschool. So the economic modeling of what it means in a society where, I know this isn't your world, 2 days ago, Treasury and my economists produced a new paper on long-term debt for the United States. The numbers are terrifying. And I don't have an elegant way to say this. If those of you rely on research grants, or you somehow think there's money coming from the federal government to help you, the numbers are terrifying. We went from a CBO projection of saying in 30 years we'll be at 175% of debt to GDP to now 250. That means my little boy is 33. He's just finished his postdoc. You see a trend? We right now as a country borrow 88 $100,000 every second. And when you see the rage on something like Doge, you realize the actual cuts from Doge were less than 1 day of borrowing. How do you become part of the solution? How do you say your fixation is more than just longevity? It's the ability to have populations live healthier and productivity. Okay, the derivative of this is we have a fixation in our office of cures, not maintenance of misery. And I hope that makes some sense for some of you, is what's my disruption instead of living just a little bit better. And look, I've had failures. I've moved money around for hemophilia. Thought we had amazing. Turns out we had some sickle cell anemia. We may be almost there with a couple tweaks, but there's things like this that instead of just a little better way to manage misery, you have the disruption of a cure. Hep C is still one of the great examples in our society of, those that had fun in the 70s, the liver transplant centers, and the hospitals that invested in the liver transplant centers were pissed off that Sovaldi was, so seriously, they lobbied me to slow down access to the drug. So it gives you an idea of those things. Third thing is, I sort of wish some of you, who particularly may be on the more policy side than the research side, would find time to work with some of the blue zone movement. I'm going to just say it. My fear is some of the movement is becoming a upper or lower upper class fixation, and becoming a way saying, be a grantor to our hospital foundation, and you're going to join us in this blue zone project, but the mass of the population, And my simple example sort of comes back. I did some math for the blue zone here and did a presentation. The most powerful thing you could do for our marketplace was take on obesity. But they didn't like that. Those folks weren't the folks who would contribute to the foundation. But seriously, I have a tribal community right over here, the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, that for a male, average age, life expectancy may be 54, 55 years old. It's one of the wealthiest tribes in America. It's not an income situation. They apparently lack certain enzymes to break down sugars, so they have the second highest per capita diabetes in the world. Wouldn't that be a really remarkable place to try to help our brothers and sisters who have the genetic differences? And so I've been fixated on helping them. Actually, a couple years ago, I helped them getting access to glutites, and they're trying to do an experiment with it. Okay, let's see. I did economics. I did society. The last thing, who are my Arizona-based folks? Oh, I'm happy then. Oh, I love you. All right, let's actually go to Crazy Town for a moment. A few years ago, I wrote a sandbox law for Arizona, even though I'm in Congress. And a state legislator named Jeff Winiger, who actually has a really high IQ, introduced it and got it passed. And it was originally for distributive ledger. I have a unusual expertise in node networks because I don't have a life, so I work on weird stuff. And it was more, hey, could we actually build bulletproof IDs, bulletproof security, these things. But that sandbox law has been copied by a couple other states. About 2-3 months ago, Utah just did using their sandbox law to say AI gets to you can renew your prescriptions. If they're non-narcotic, you can now actually just put it in. You no longer need to go visit your doctor every 90 days. For my doctors who are annoyed by that, don't care. But look, I'm going to be, can you believe, on a calcium inhibitor that I started when I was like 19. I'm just genetically wired really hot. What happens if, for those of us in Arizona, we could use our unique sandbox law? And what it does is it gives you some tort liability shields to do some experiments. Now, you still have to hit certain high levels of competency, or confidence. But if I know I have certain genetic even though it may not present itself for 2-3 decades, should I be allowed, with being fully informed, to actually take on certain genetic treatments? Should I be allowed to, with fully informed, which is always my, to experiment with certain peptides? Particularly, you know, it's uncomfortable because you're trying to treat people like adults and as knowledgeable individuals, and so often the general public is busy in their lives. They don't have a week to sit and read the literature. But there are a series of things that if I came to you and said, we want to do, in your world, longevity. Is it genetic? We're going to do that. Is it certain drugs? Is it dietary? Is it taking on certain diseases very, very early? You know, is it that there's the argument that a full body MRI and the next generation of multi-cancer blood tests could be one of the most powerful things to stop fire? Yeah, oh, we actually have a decent, yeah, you're being very smart. That's actually, Arizona actually has a decent right to try, except for one small problem. It has to be almost the last thing left before you're on your deathbed. And are we about to do the time where we're going to start thinking more about our impairments in a prophylactic way than a mitigation way? And I hope I'm making sense. You're the first group I've ever sort of walked this through other than my economists. But it is a very different way. And on a personal level, I have a fixation that this is going to be the next generation of economic growth. I want them here in the desert. Yeah, they can go to Flagstaff too. But I want them here in Arizona. And so there's a couple quirky things happening. A double probation secret. We think we have a company that's going to move to Chandler. And the CEO is a friend, so there's more. But they're doing qubits, specialty attachments for quantum computer. And if I can get them here, please understand, I'm pretty much a radical. I actually think we'll have a functioning quantum in about 36 months. I'm hopeful. Please, whatever you do, you may need to close down your crypto wallets. Okay, for those that didn't laugh, please turn to the ones that did and ask for the explanation. But what happens if, for those of you that need capital, I'm trying to raise money for my idea, but in some places, the technology, the concept, the payoff of it is so far off in the future. And if I can prevent you a state saying we could actually do some at least 1s and 2s here in Arizona, yeah, FDA is going to stick their nose into it, but because we have an expanded right to try, you can do certain things just local under those rules. You're all going to be much smarter at this than I am, and I have 7 lawyers that work for me, and God, I have 7 too many lawyers. And they'll find 1,000 reasons why we can't do it, but there's a way other states are starting to experiment on this. Any questions on the rambling before I do one last bit? I'm a bit of a heretic on this. I genuinely, years ago, was one of the experts. I actually helped write the escrowing papers on latency for node networks. Now today we have enough computer power. And yet, I'm fine with it as a medium of exchange for trade. I don't, except for the fact we're crashing the value of the US dollar, I'm nervous. That's a whole, but I have a whole presentation on that. And I have about an hour and a half slideshow if you want it. Yes, sir. Yeah.
If you have an avocado in the morning before you put anything else in your mouth, you basically get free Ozempic.
Yeah.
Okay, free Ozempic, GLP-1 from your gut buddies that ate the fiber in the avocado. And you also get the satiety from the oil in the avocado.
So you're saying I don't have to go out and kiss a Gila monster? Oh, come on. I thought that would work as a joke. You know the history, don't you? Okay, come on.
Don't put any monosaccharides in your drink.
Yeah. So what if I came to you as saying, okay, you and I think somewhat the same. Okay, let me be a bit of a control freak and a jerk. As a society, we have something called Access here in Arizona, our Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System. It's our Medicaid system in Arizona. 28.4% of our state's population is on it. The majority of the population is statistically obese. It has a remarkably large disproportionate population that's morbidly obese. Should we also be giving them EBT cards, food stamps that they're allowed to go buy onion rings with? In some ways, we're poisoning our own brothers and sisters. But I actually helped, 4 years ago, it was actually an East Coast university was working in a particular county. We're saying, okay, we're going to take our folks that need nutrition support and we're going to provide them healthy boxed food and we're going to drop it off 3 times a week at their door. Anyone want to guess what happened? Nothing. They actually went out and interviewed people, and it turns out being, in this case, stressed and poor, it turns out it's actually really difficult. They came back and said, here's the pouch of greens, you just microwave it. Here's the orange, it's already peeled, pull it and eat it. When they made it so it became hyper convenient, it was more expensive, it actually started to work. In some ways, you and I have to figure out a way to help our brothers and sisters, particularly for those that need intervention and those things, that we're giving them things that make it so they're also not a ward of the subsidized healthcare system. And I would argue there's a moral loop if we do it the right way. Yes, ma'am.
Could we use your quant guys, your econs and PhDs, to help create channels to disseminate that information, that math, to help have more of this longevity movement so that we could talk more about the economy and its potential benefits, to get more investors involved, to communicate, we need that support here in this movement.
I have so many things I can give you. I've gone around the country doing, if I'd known a little better, I would have brought one of my slideshows. But we weren't going to. What will devastate you intellectually is how many people don't either grasp it or they think it's an elitist movement. Or the flip side, I'm the life insurance company. Believe it or not, they like this. Most people think, oh, life insurance aren't. No, just the opposite. They like this. The pension providers despise you. Because you all get it because this check goes out, this check goes out. And even today, post-COVID, when now we're seeing, maybe there's still some very weird numbers on male morbidity, some of those things. But there's actually entire models out there. Okay, God, I always worry when a camera, I had nothing to do with this. I didn't advocate. I want to put my disclaimer. But was anyone here geeky enough that about 20 years ago, the Czech Republic, one of their pension plans put out a paper, and it was a thought experiment, but it blew up on them, about smoking. saying it would be really good for the pension system if more Czechs actually smoked? Because it turns out it's actually a fairly fast way to die compared to some of the others, and at much younger, and it would help the... So there's no free option here. I need you to be successful because I'm 64 with a 3-year-old. But that's a personal. I also think it's moral. But I also think in some ways what we've done in agriculture. All right, let's go to Crazy Town for a moment. Anyone here do any type of food, nutrition, agriculture policy? Do I have a long time ago? Okay, bit of trivia. And this one, I still have trouble, but I vetted it twice. North America, apparently, if you and I could step back a couple hundred years ago, now apparently many of them were just horrible tasting. 3,300 types of grain grew in North America. What do we grow today? 5. Yeah, and a couple that are more cattle feed, but they're not necessarily the subsidized. So if you've commoditized your crops, how do you add value? How do you make it so there's a profit? You process and process and process and turn them into other things. In many ways, the way we did crop support is as bad as the way we did nutrition support. You could actually come up and say, hey, should we be really growing this type of grain in this location when there was more indigenous grain over here that is more custom and some, the populations? And you're an absolute heretic when you talk about these things, because we still have a nutrition system, a farm system that is give us the lowest unit price because we have starvation. We don't. Our 1938 policies, in many ways, are the very things we now have to battle when we have states that over half their population are technically obese. I would argue from the most basic farm support programs to the way we do support, we're killing our own people. And, moving to, oh, yay, I got a $149 glutide pill. It's better than nothing, but wouldn't it be neat to see it as a more holistic of we're going to engage in the revolution from what we're growing to what we suggest to eat to how we help our brothers and sisters who need the nutrition support to what we finance to those things all the way down to the research and potentially those of us who may have a way where you could get rid of my hypertension, my high cholesterol, and my asthma, and suddenly I get a few extra years of quality life. And I know we got to go. If any of you, we actually have some very well quoted papers we've written at the Joint Economic Committee Republicans. We actually wrote a paper about 4 or 5 years ago on the potential budgetary effects for just GLP-1s. And then walk down, and within those papers we do some hierarchy on nutrition support and some other things. So if any of you are ever playing grad student or have to do a paper, many of them have been very well quoted. But we got to accept we are the outliers that fixate on these things. And there will be those who will show up. I mean, I've already had some folks who manage a couple of the biggest pensions in the United States who both want for themselves and don't want you to succeed. But on the flip side, 2 or 3 of the largest life insurance companies in America are putting money into the Blue Zone movement. Maybe you can get some of that cash, because the Blue Zone movement is in some ways doing what we already know instead of the next generation what we need to know. Hey, thank you for having me.
a
or
shared
bad
mind. I
thing?
think we're a shared mind. No, it's a good thing for me. I don't know about you. Thank you so much, Congressman. That was excellent. I just want to say a few things to piggyback off what the Congressman said. The Montana Right to Try bill that was mentioned was actually an A4LI initiative that we wrote the bill on and got lobbied for and got passed in 2023 and 2025. So I know we have a lot of Arizonans in the room. I think Arizona is a prime state for something like that to happen. So we should all get in touch and talk about that after. I want to get on with the rest of our day